The booth at Della's diner was always the same. Corner seat, cracked vinyl, window fogged with cold. Marcus Reed had sat in it every Friday night for 3 years. And every Friday night, the waitress named Peggy brought 2 plates of meatloaf without being asked. 1 plate for Marcus, 1 plate for Eli, except Eli was never coming back. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from. Nobody in Clover Creek talked about it openly anymore, though everyone knew. 3 years ago, on a rainy October evening, a drunk driver had run a red light en route 9 and taken Marcus's 11-year-old son from him in the space of a heartbeat. Since then, Marcus had aged a decade in his face, barely spoken more than a few words to anyone, and kept that second plate of meatloaf as the only ritual that felt like love. He wasn't looking for anything on the night Claire and her son walked in. It was February, bitter cold, the kind of night that made the windows shake. The diner's bell above the door rang once, and Marcus looked up out of habit. A woman stood in the doorway, with a boy pressed tight against her side. Maybe 7 years old, eyes too wide and too cautious for a child. The woman, dark circles beneath her eyes. A bruise yellowing near, her jaw that she'd tried to cover with her collar. Scanned the room like someone who expected to be told to leave. Peggy started toward them and Marcus watched. He saw the boy whisper something. He saw the woman close her eyes for just a second. The way people do when they're fighting against something. Shame, maybe, or exhaustion. Then she looked up and said quietly, loud enough to carry, "My son is hungry. We don't have much. Can we just sit a while and get warm?" Marcus didn't know why he stood up. He would never be able to explain it properly. Maybe it was the way the boy's eyes darted to his second plate of meatloaf. Maybe it was Eli. Maybe it was simply that some part of him, that had been frozen for 3 years, cracked open in that moment without warning. "Sit here," Marcus said. "There's enough." The woman, Claire, she told him later, Claire Voss, looked at him like she was waiting for the condition. The catch, the cost. There wasn't one. Marcus slid the untouched plate across the table toward the boy, whose name was Noah, and Noah ate like he hadn't eaten since morning, because he hadn't. They didn't talk much that first night. Marcus didn't ask questions. Claire didn't offer explanations. Noah finished the meatloaf and fell asleep, against his mother's arm before 9 o'clock. When Marcus paid the bill and pulled on his coat, he hesitated at the edge of the booth. "Where are you staying tonight?" he asked. Claire's jaw tightened. "We're fine." He nodded and wrote his address on a diner napkin. "My garage has a space heater and a lock on the door," he said. "That's all I'm offering." "Door stays locked from your side." She didn't come that night. But she came the next, and she stayed for a week, and then the week became a month. It wasn't romantic, at least not at first, and not in any simple way. It was something more complicated and more fragile than that. Marcus had grown so accustomed to silence that having voices in his house, again Noah asking questions, about his tools, Claire making coffee in the morning, footsteps on the floorboards, felt like learning to walk on a limb that had been asleep too long. It was pins and needles everywhere. Claire was cautious in the way that people are when trust has been used against them repeatedly. She had left Daniel Voss 8 months ago, taking Noah and a single duffel bag and a plan that had mostly fallen apart by the time February came. She'd lost her apartment when the money ran out, lost her waitressing job when Daniel showed up at the restaurant and made a scene. She had been careful not to stay anywhere too long, afraid he would find her, afraid of what he would do when he did. She told Marcus pieces of this over weeks, not all at once. And Marcus listened the way he had always listened, without rushing, without filling silences with the wrong words. He had learned in grief that some things don't need a response, they just need a witness. By spring, Claire was working at the hardware store 2 blocks from Della's, and Noah was enrolled at the elementary school where Marcus had once walked. Eli threw the front doors on the first day of kindergarten. Marcus stood with Noah on the sidewalk outside the school on his first morning and felt something in his chest. Shift, not replace. Never replace, but expand. as though the grief had not shrunk, but the heart around it had grown to hold. Something new alongside it. It was the school that brought trouble. Daniel Voss had always been methodical. He found Noah's school enrollment through a contact at the county records office, and he arrived in Clover Creek on a Wednesday in April, looking calm and well-dressed and completely certain of his right to take back what he considered his. He showed up at the school first. The principal called Claire. Claire called Marcus. By the time Daniel walked up the driveway of Marcus's house that evening, half the street was watching from their front porches. Marcus had been afraid that day. He admitted it later, sitting in the dark on the back steps with Peggy from the diner and her husband Roy and Claire beside him. He had not raised his voice or made threats. He had stood at the edge of his property and said, calmly and clearly, "She doesn't want to see you. Noah doesn't want to see you. You need to leave." Daniel did not leave. He came back the next morning. And the morning after that, what followed was 3 weeks of legal hearings, a restraining order, character witnesses, and a courtroom in which a judge looked at Daniel Voss's history, documented now. Finally, in a way it had never been before, and found that history sufficient. Peggy testified. The school principal testified. 3 neighbors testified. Marcus testified, not about love or heroism, but about what he had seen, a woman trying to protect her child, a boy who flinched at loud noises, a family that deserved to stand still for once. The restraining order was granted. Daniel Voss drove out of Clover Creek and did not come back. There was no dramatic moment in the parking lot afterward. No music, no neat resolution. Claire stood outside the courthouse with Noah's hand in hers and breathed. Just breathed. Marcus stood beside her and did the same. They were not healed. Marcus still set 2 places at the table some nights before catching himself. Claire still woke some mornings with her heart already racing before she opened her eyes. Noah still sometimes asked quiet questions at his father that had no easy answers. Grief and fear do not leave because you win a court case or find a warm room. They linger, they shift. They become part of the landscape of a life rather than its entire view. But that Friday, for the first time in 3 years, Marcus walked into Della's diner and sat down in the corner booth and ordered 1 plate of meatloaf. Peggy brought it without a word. He ate it slowly, and then he looked out the fogged window at the street, and he felt something he had nearly forgotten the name of. Not happiness exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something that meant I am still here. I am still in this world. There is still something worth staying for. Outside, Claire and Noah were visible. Through the glass, laughing about something, the cold turning their breath to little clouds. They came inside a moment later, shaking the chill off their coats. Noah already talking before he'd even reached the booth. Marcus moved over to make room. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Kindness True Stories, where every week we bring you real tales of human courage, compassion, and the unexpected ways people find their way back to each other. Your support keeps these stories alive.